removing information that is problematic. Anything that would go against World Health Organization recommendations would be a violation of our policy.
So you're not just putting the truth next to the lie, you're taking the lie down. That's a pretty aggressive approach.
Well, I mean, we do remove, across YouTube.
That's the CEO of YouTube saying that they'll be deleting any information that disagrees with the World Health Organization. This is an organization that was wrong about whether there was human-to-human transmission of coronavirus. An organization that was wrong about whether or not there was going to be a pandemic. An organization that was wrong about whether or not we should be using face masks. And now if you say something that disagrees with them, you'll be deleted from YouTube. Now more than ever, we need solutions that don't allow one company to control the narrative. I am an entrepreneur, scientist, and I guess inventor. I've created something called the LBRY protocol, LBRY. We believe it's the future of free speech and communication online. It's being used by several 100,000 people each week right now, growing very fast. And the whole idea is, it's why it's called LBRY, can we create a system of distributing digital information that is the most robust to interference censorship? The idea is, anyone can use it, anyone to contribute, but it's literally owned by no one. And we think this is way different than a lot of technology that's come before. There's sort of two ways of looking at it. There's the mom version and the nerd version. The mom version is, it's like YouTube, but there's no Google. So we have the user experience of YouTube, but there's no one company in charge of it. There's no one point of failure. The nerd version is that LBRY is a decentralized, peer-to-peer, blockchain-based protocol that facilitates the discovery, distribution, and purchase of digital content. You can probably see why I use the first sentence more often than the second one. Yeah. It's about there being no one single point of failure, no one single place of control. I mean, this is how a blockchain works. A blockchain is a database. That's all it is. It's a new database. Sometimes I'll describe it as the world's worst database, except the new property that's new to any database before it is no one party, no one entity controls the database. So Bitcoin and a lot of other coins sort of just did the sort of simple first thing you would do with this is, let's just use this database to make a ledger of accounts. And that's all the Bitcoin database is. It's an account ID and a balance. That's all it does. But we can do lots of other things with this. In the case of LBRY, we're saying we can use it to catalog the world's information. It's sort of like a Dewey Decimal System or a catalog for information that exists. And there's never been a way to store this. It's called metadata, what this type of data is called. Metadata is what's in the card catalog. There's never been a way to store metadata in a decentralized way and retain a view of everything in the system. So the LBRY blockchain contains an entry for every single thing that exists. And so you have a coherent view in a decentralized network. And that's the new thing. That's what's really cool. And that's why I'm really excited about working on LBRY. People can distribute files, digital content, potentially distribute files and digital content that other people think it's wrong to distribute. And whether the viability of that probably depends on how wrong people think it is. LBRY leverages a lot of economics and market-based properties. So in the case, so it's going to depend. If someone does something illegal on LBRY, we will work with the authorities to the extent that we can provide information. We maintain a blacklist of what's illegal. So if we're told by a government that something is illegal, we record that so that users who want to operate legally, which we strongly encourage, aren't accessing content that's illegal. And no software that we ship can access content that's known to be illegal without being altered or configured in a different way. What LBRY is it's a protocol, right? So it's to some extent saying, how can we stop it from doing bad things is sort of like saying, well, how can we stop someone from sending something bad over email? How can we stop someone doing something bad over HTTP, the traditional web? I mean, the answer is you go after the people who are doing the bad stuff, right? We don't expect a lever of control at the protocol level. If we had a lever of control at the protocol level, maybe we could keep the bad stuff out, but it would also mean that it gives governments and other authoritarian types an ability to control what people can watch, read, and listen to. And so that's why I think it's really important that it's decentralized.
So it's a censorship-less protocol, right?
Because I am one of those sticklers for being technically correct, I say censorship resistance. To call something censorship proof, I think if China wanted to censor just about anything and said we're going to put our entire nation's weight behind this, we're willing to start wars, we're willing to disrupt the internet fundamentally, I think, I'm not 100% confident those things couldn't happen.
Right.
Not over LBRY.
Do you think there's going to be a time when, like, this is what I'm hoping for, where like suddenly you just catch fire and just start blowing past YouTube? Is there going to be that moment?
Yeah, well, I mean, YouTube is billions, so even at like really good startup growth, which might be something like 15, 20% a week, you're still talking about a couple of years to overtake the incumbent. So it's never like this overnight thing. I mean, our growth has been really tremendous for going on 3 to 4 months and is showing no signs of stopping.
Are you having any issue with the state with like your currency, or like they trying to say it's a stock or anything like that? Or?
So the main concern is whether these blockchain tokens are investment instruments, but yeah, my company is at the frontier of technology, and when you're at the frontier of technology, it very commonly happens regulations aren't set up to deal with you. So we've spent more than $600,000 in legal fees basically to get a bunch of question marks back as answers. And the way business works in the United States is you spend years of your life, you and dozens of other people, you spend millions of dollars, and then one day you're told what you're doing was okay or not. And it's certainly one of the things that's made me dislike the government, more than any other personal experience, for sure.
And so you're mostly getting sued by the state?
It's not getting sued. It's trying to get you. There's very little ability to get proactive clarity, right? We could write up a document that spells out exactly what we're trying to do. Is this okay or not? There's no way to do that. The only way you ask a lawyer, and the lawyer interprets the statutes, and the lawyer says, well, is this legal or not? But when you're doing something that's so new that there's no court history as to how the statutes are going to be interpreted in this case, the answer ends up being, well, they say it's probably okay, but we'll find out one day. And so that's what you do. You go and build. You spend years and years of your life building this thing, and then one day you'll just be told, yeah, that was okay, or no, it wasn't.
Like, if it's not okay, would they just shut you down? They're going to put you in prison? They're going to sue you, all three?
One of my early questions with the lawyers was like, would it be civil or would it be criminal? I've received very strong assurances that like it would just be civil issues, but they could get shut down. I mean, I could look at it. There's a really cool company in New York. I forget the name of it. But what they did was they took broadcast, the broadcast antennas in New York. They would buy you an antenna, your own antenna, right? So they owned one just for you. And they would replay that. This is perfectly legal. Courts have said this is perfectly legal. So if I own an antenna in New York City, I can take the signal of that and watch it in Houston, Texas.
Oh, you say
capture it, send it over the internet, I can watch it in Houston, Texas. Court said this is perfectly legal. So a company said, okay, we'll do this for people. Anyone who signs up for our service, we will buy them an individual antenna. We're not going to pull antennas, we're not going to share antenna. Every customer of our service has one antenna, it's only their antenna, and then we'll stream it for them over the internet, as courts have said is legal for a person to do. Had to go all the way to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says, well, to people on the outside buying your service, it feels like you're a cable company. What you're doing isn't a cable company, but people think it is. Therefore, you're regulated by the laws of cable companies, and you're breaking the law. Right? And this is one example of dozens where companies just, tens of millions of dollars spent on that company, building it up, growing it. They had tons of customers. Dead overnight. Domain just goes down.
Did anybody go to prison or anything like that?
No one went to prison in that case.
They probably had to pay out the nose, probably. They had probably to pay through the nose.
Yeah. I will say with corporate protections in the U.S., it generally doesn't reach you personally. I don't think they suffered personally, but okay. They spent an incredible amount of their time, building this thing that people wanted to use, yeah. and the government kills it. One bright side of what I'm doing with LBRY, LBRY, is at least that, the design is such that it should keep going without us. It's all open source software, it's all decentralized. So that does make me feel a little bit better about it. But yeah, it's one of the most unpleasant parts of this job, for sure.
So back to that case and in general cases.
Yeah.
What happens is these politicians they call them donors, but they're investors. They get into office and then they manipulate the market for the people that invested in their entity, their power source, right?
Yeah.
Do you think that has a lot to do with that case in New York? And does that have a lot to do with what you're dealing with?
Well, this is entirely judicial, and even what we face will be entirely judicial. Well, no, I mean, Congress could pass new laws on blockchain assets, and that's definitely a fear. But for the most part, the struggle is just even how do existing laws, which are already on the books, how are they interpreted? You can't get proactive judgment, you know. So it's just this is just the way it works.
So you're just dealing with a lot of incompetence too, as well, probably.
Yeah, I mean. My lawyers say I shouldn't make derogatory comments about specifics because they're retaliatory, but I can't. That's the other crazy part about it. I will say this. I've been in the highest level of negotiations with government officials that I've ever been in my entire life. So I've really been seeing how the sausage gets made, and I've never been that kind of person who's like the government is the mafia. But this is the most it's ever felt like. You talk to a government organization, they specifically say, let's have this conversation over the phone so there's not a record of it. And they use language that's like literally similar to like, it would be a shame if we had, it would be a shame.
Really?
Yes, they will threaten you with just additional subpoenas, additional actions, purely because they know it hurts the company. And they will never explicitly say that, but they'll sure as hell say it implicitly.
Wow. Yeah. Wow. So what's your take from that? What's your takeaway?
I mean, my strongest...
so not to cut you off, and I want to hear this, but it seems like also, that would be so frustrating.
Yeah, and this is, I guess, another, I do differ from some other libertarians. Despite suffering all this, I don't think the people doing this were evil. I don't. Mm-hmm. I think they, for the most part, some of them are maybe a little cynical, a little opportunistic, but everyone is responding to their local incentives, and a lot of them think they're doing the right thing. Most of them think they're doing the right thing.
Interesting.
My attitude is that the world is the way that it is because people are about 80% good, 20% bad in responding to local incentives, right? I think most people are mostly good.
Yeah.
And so why do we get the outcomes that we do? It's because they're responding to the incentives that they face, right? They're not being cynically evil. They're responding to the incentives.
I would tend to agree with you. So is democracy finished? And if so, what next?
No, I don't think. Is democracy finished? No, I think billions of people will be living under democracy for decades to come.
But do you think it's a dead man walking, or no?
No. I think the real problem is that people who don't want to live under democracy, whether they want to live under communism, socialism, left libertarianism, radical market libertarianism, mixed societies. We have multiple overlapping governments. Futarchy. This is Robin Hanson. He's an economist at GMU. It's basically this economics-based law where you're making stakes about whether the law will produce certain outcomes. So you only produce law that actually works, or it costs you money. So if you pass a law, I actually don't understand it super well.
That's interesting.
So I hope Robin never sees this if I'm getting it wrong. But I believe it's something like, you're making these, you're saying like, okay, this law is designed to produce this outcome, and then the economics are such that if it doesn't produce the outcome, and you have to say, specifically what outcome you expect, then it is economically disincentivized to pass that law.
That's interesting. So, how does that look if you have all these overlapping, like, what does it look like?
Well, like, we have, 195-ish countries in the world today. I don't know that the world would look that different if we had 220 or 250 or whatever. And, to me, the biggest problem in the world today is this lack of micro-experimentation with government and society. It's the biggest problem in the world. I would rank this as it's 1 through 5 for me. It is so important. Without the ability to do this, nothing improves. We don't discover things. Democracy, I'm critical of it. But at one time it was an innovation, right? Like, democracy was better than what came before it. And we're stuck. We're just stuck. We're not continuing to evolve. What would happen if you went back in time to 1920 and you said, okay, there's 20 brands of restaurants. That's it. That's all there's ever going to be. Not allowed to make new ones. Would we see the same vibrant and rich food culture that exists in America 100 years later? Probably not. There's much less incentive to innovate. Because they know that there can be no competitors, they're incentivized to act as an oligopoly, right? This is countries. This is what happens, right? If the most offensive thing that the United States does is it charges people money to leave and it doesn't let new countries form. If it didn't do those two things, I actually wouldn't dislike the United States. I would say it's not for me, and I would go live in a new, smaller society. It doesn't matter how much money you make. It doesn't matter how much resources you have. You could have hundreds of billions of dollars. You could have trillions of dollars. You cannot form a new society. You have to pick from one of 195, if they'll even take you, right? Mm-hmm. And I just think it's so weird. And so to me, like, I'm sympathetic with socialists, even though I think that their ideas wouldn't produce prosperity. They suffer in the same way. They think they would. And these skin in the game experiments, they're better for everyone. If 20 people want to go live, in a way that by themselves, or 20,000, or there can be some thresholds. I'm not saying there can be a society of one for every single person, but like there's millions of people that are saying we want to live this other way. Let us, and they're not allowed to. And I don't know how anyone can support that.
Why are they not allowed to?
Because you can't start a new country. You can't start a new state. There's not country. Even if a country in Africa was like or some other nation where the economics might be such that it makes sense. That they said, okay, we want to sell off 5 square miles, and we're going to sell it to Jeff Bezos, and Jeff Bezos is going to start a new nation, right? Under any number of whatever. It's going to be a technocratic society, whatever. Who knows? It's going to be a dictatorship. I don't know. The point is, there's no way it would fly. I mean, like the UN, the United States, other major countries, because it would be a threat to them.
Yeah, that's right. And so do you think democracy is going to evolve, or it seems like it's devolving rapidly? And I do agree, it is an improvement from the monarchies and that ridiculousness.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. It takes a long time for society to change, and and another thing is technology keeps getting better. So despite governance getting worse, like, I would rather be alive now than 100 years ago, right? That's not because of things government's done, it's because of things entrepreneurs have done. So people's lives are getting better. Most of the time that we see an uprising or sort of political turmoil, which has a whole bunch of costs, and is something that also, we should be very uncertain as to whether or not we want that. It has to be things are going wrong, things are going bad, or there's an external threat, and I don't see any of those things as being that likely. So I think democracy will be here for decades, possibly centuries. I just hope that that there will be some way that some bands or groups of people start to have some ability to experiment with other ways of organizing society.
Well, do you want to talk about that? Because you're kind of doing that right now, aren't you?
Yeah, so I live in New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project. Free State Project is a movement to concentrate libertarians in the state of New Hampshire, so people who want government to be very small to non-existent, somewhere in that band. We believe that people who support that kind of idea can be more effective by concentrating. My view is that not that many, probably the people watching this film are open to being persuaded. Most people aren't. That's not even a bad thing. Open-mindedness is maladaptive. As you get sort of lower on the intelligence spectrum, you'll just get convinced by all kinds of bad ideas. So it makes sense that people just say, oh, well, the way that society works is the way that it should work, and that's right. That's a safer choice. You manage to come into existence under this set of rules. Like, things staying the same is more likely to be good for you than radical change. But I think that this, I kind of lost my train of thought. I think that there are some people who are capable of being persuaded. I think that I think that a lot of these people do become libertarians because I think the arguments are very strong, both philosophically and empirically. And I think that if you're persuaded by those kinds of ideas, fighting the battle of we're going to persuade 150 million Americans that these ideas are right, I mean, maybe there's some argument out there that hasn't been found yet, but to me it's sort of 40 years or 50 years or longer of fighting a losing battle. full credit to those who have made a difference, and I'm not saying like what Ron Paul's done is awesome, and what Rothbard and Friedman and other people have done, that's all awesome, and that stuff shouldn't stop. But if we concentrate ourselves politically, we have the ability to have more influence in a state. We've already had tremendous impact in New Hampshire. We have 20 elected representatives who not all are publicly out as free staters, but who are at least privately known to us to be free staters. And the idea is that this can kind of cascade. It has the dynamics, as long as with each generation, more people are moving to New Hampshire, and I don't mean generation in 30 years, I mean like each unit of time, then it's self-reinforcing. One thing the United States does have going for it is it does have a history of federalism. There is an ability for states, if they wanted to really resist the federal government. I think there is some room to do that. And there are enough libertarians that if we concentrate in New Hampshire, we really can take over the state. And I don't even think it requires anywhere near a majority because of this effect that I was talking about. A lot of people take their cues and their beliefs from other people around them in society, and if the people who are coming are speaking out, are speaking publicly, our percentage in the state may only be around I think we're approaching 1% of the population, but the amount of letters to the editor or news commentary that we're getting, or businesses that are being run by us, or real estate that's owned by us, that's all way higher than our percentage of the population, right? And it's all going and trending up in a really positive direction. So I think this is what people have to do. Again, and this isn't just about building a sort of stateless libertarian society. This is if you're a socialist or a communist, like you've got to concentrate. This is the only hope that we have of breaking free and being able to perform, to live in potential new societies.
Yeah, I mean, communism could work if it's voluntary. There's some great communes in Israel that are killing it. The people, you pay all your money, but they say you're going to get health care. They say you're going to get free education. It's going to be good health care, good education, and you get it. And if you don't get it, you can leave. Yeah.
I mean, I have friends who are like very strong socialists, and I totally believe that they could live in a society that would make them happy, and that society could potentially work. I don't think it would be as prosperous or dynamic or innovative or other things, but you can. I mean, look, actually, here, I don't know if this is just me giving random political rants at this point, but one thing that I think a lot of libertarians get wrong is they think that economic prosperity is happiness, and the empirical research in psychology is just that that's simply false. Right? It's progress in your life can make you happy, but people who live in much more impoverished nations as a whole, they're actually not any less happy than Americans and richer nations.
You can see how sweet these people are. It's amazing.
Right? So,
but don't you think socialists get that wrong too? Because they think that the money will be the solution to everything, and that everybody's life is better that has money, and everybody's life is worth it that doesn't have money?
Yeah. Well, yes. I think that socialists get that wrong. I think that, what a lot of human happiness, I think the right answer, if you look at the sort of research, is that a lot of happiness is driven by your social standing, so your relative social standing. And so I will give some socialists some credit there, because that they don't put it in these words, but that's what they're attacking. They essentially feel that rich people have far too much social standing, and that they're trying to redistribute social standing. That's actually what they're trying to do.
What is social standing?
How much power there's a difference between, I guess maybe I can illustrate it via examples. So if you look at, say, an egalitarian, a tribe of humans, when we were in these smaller bands, maybe 40 to 60 people. It was pretty egalitarian. No one person had that much power over others. It was basically like enforced sharing. If there was too much control being exerted by a person or a group of individuals, there's an ability for other parts of that group to fracture off, to go away, and that also kept the power balance in check. And so you had relatively compressed standing between people. Not one person had too much power over other people. At the other end, I think you would be looking at sort of larger monarch-based authoritarian societies where you have a very strong hierarchy. The king or other officials have a ton of rights that other people do not have, right? And there's a vast difference. There's not an ability to leave or walk away. And so that's that kind of dynamic that I'm talking about. It's never zero, I want to be clear. It's never completely flat. Even in that egalitarian, there's still people with more power, more status, more influence. But the question is, where do you fall in that continuum? And I do think it's pretty important to how we end up feeling as human beings. I like a lot of what modern society gives me, but I don't like living in large cities, partially for this reason. It's just too much all the time, all around you. It's one of the reasons I think it's important to live. Part of why I like living in New Hampshire is like living among a community of people that I feel like, you know, we're all at the same level. We're all peers. We share beliefs. There's a comfort in it that I actually didn't even realize I was missing when I lived in a sort of more, I guess we'll use the term statist place. I'm not claiming that we're slaves in America. I think the thing that makes us most arguably not is that we can leave. But otherwise, I don't think democracy, I don't own my body. I do not own my body, even today. And, my life is much better than that of a slave, so I don't want to be said to be making that comparison. But like, not owning your body is a pretty key part of being owned by others.
Tell me how you don't own your body.
I can't put anything I want inside of it, right? It's my body. If I want to put a plant inside of my body in my own house and not leave it, it seems really unclear how to argue that that is harming other people. I can't fathom it. And yet it's illegal everywhere in the United States.
You get extorted when you work. And if you don't pay the extortion, guys with costumes come to your house, point a gun to your head, and put you in a cage. That's the system.
Yeah.
The fear of a cage.
Right. Well, that's okay if you're opting into it. And that's the key thing is, are people consenting to that system?
So everything is about voluntarism.
Everything, yes. It's about things being voluntary. It's all about things being voluntary.
So how did you end up like this, do you think? What was your upbringing like? Was there anything you can think of that maybe made you think like this?
Well, it's funny. I'm here in Acapulco. There's some speakers and content here that I would describe as like a little wooey or new agey or whatever you might.
Little?
I'm being polite. Hey, whatever floats your boat. So I'm not trying to knock it away. But my parents were a little bit that way. They believed in karma and reincarnation, and I was raised as a vegetarian, and they're very spiritual. And I never really saw much of the connection. I was like, well, how did I end up being a libertarian? I mean, I guess they practiced peaceful parenting, and they encouraged education, and they let me make my own choices, and they never forced things on me, and maybe that helped me be this way. But maybe there's more of a connection there than I realized in terms of the mental desire to be free in a certain way. And maybe we all shared that mental desire to be free, and they found it in their meditation and religion, and I'm pursuing it in a different way.
Sounds like you hit a home run with your parents.
I love my parents, yeah.
Man, that's good stuff. Yeah. I'm trying to be like that with my daughter.
Yeah.